Hey guys, this video is part 3 in the mini-series Buying Land in Japan, which is actually on the Buying a House in Japan playlist, in an interesting twist. Again, this video is really only going to be of mild interest maybe to someone who's actually going to buy a house or land in Japan, or maybe someone who might be going to do business in Japan. It might be relevant to them as well. Also, this video might be relevant to someone who's going to open a Japanese bank account for reasons you'll see soon. And maybe just people who are interested in just Japanese culture in general. There might be something in it for you, who knows. When you get sick of it, just go watch something else. Those of you who are genuinely following this, who haven't seen the first 2 videos, there'll be a link down the bottom to the Buying House in Japan playlist. You might want to watch the first 2 first before you watch this, just to give you an idea of where it is. So how far into it are we? We're 2 months into the process from when we first said we wanted to buy it to now. It's taken 2 months so far. And those of you who saw the last one will recall that we got to the point where we had to open a bank account at the same bank and branch as the owner of the place who's selling the place. And we had to pay $20,000 deposit, which we were supposed to pay into his bank account, but we couldn't because we were given the wrong bank details, right? And we'd been to his bank and they said, no, we don't know this person at all. So we couldn't open the bank account that we were supposed to open for settlement, and we couldn't pay the 20 grand into his bank account. That's tight, isn't it? Can you guys see the big gutter on the left? So that's where we were last time we spoke, right? So we had to give the $20,000 to the real estate agent. So let's pop over here, let that nice lady past. So we had to pay the $20,000 to the real estate agent in cash, right? So now lady's behind us, 1 second. Sorry guys. Safety first, right? Okay, now we're right. Okay, so the real estate agent turned up, and again, he's a nice guy, but the only reason that this story is getting included in the whole story is just to give you an idea of what it's like doing business here. So he turns up at our house and take him off to a tatami room. We sit on the floor in the tatami room in Seizar opposite each other at this table, very formal and serious, and give him the $20,000. So it's 2 million yen, right? So that means that there's 200 Ichiman notes. So 200 10,000 yen notes. So, and they're in piles of 50. So he sits there, and because totally expected this, and this is one good thing that's useful. And one of the reasons we make these videos is if you anticipate these things, it makes them easier to deal with, right? So anticipating that he'd have to be very, very careful with that amount of cash, as you'd expect anywhere in the world, anticipated that he'd count it. So prepared for a bit of a wait while he counted it. So okay, here's the $20,000. Okay, no problem. So he goes, right, prepares himself there, all comfortable, and then goes, right, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, gets to 50. Okay, picks up the next bundle. 1, 2, very carefully. We've showed you before how Japanese people count money. They fold it over and then flick it back. 50, 50, 50, gets to the end, counts the 200. It took quite a bit of time. Counted the 200, put them down, and said, yep, that's all good, no mistake, and then put them back on his other side again, and picked up the first one and started counting again. Right? And again, it comes back to the same thing all the time. The most important thing in business here is to seem or to show that you are being very, very careful. So by counting it diligently once wasn't enough, wasn't showing he was careful enough, so he had to diligently count it the second time. He got to the end of counting the second bundle the second time, counted 50, he was counting out loud, counted 50, and then shook his head, no, not happy with that one, counted that one again. So it took forever, it took absolutely forever, and then finally he finished that and he gave us a receipt. Yep, that's good, and then no problem at all, then I'll take it off and I'll give it to the owner. So off he went, and then the next day called up, do you mind if I drop by your house? No, come on by. And he came by again, and he had a new set of receipts with Hunko, with stamps all over them, Hunko stamps all over them, and the owners, all the owners' stamps and everything. So it was another receipt from the owner. So we gave him the receipt that he'd given us, and he gave us this receipt from the owner and hunkered it all up, and then we had to add a bit more to the contracts to show that everybody had received the 20,000, did all that. And then he went away and came back 10 minutes later apologising that we'd missed one set of documents and we had to do all them. And so did all that, that's fine, okay. Yay! 7 or 8 weeks into it, we've got the deposit paid and accepted and receipted and the contract signed. Yes! After 7 or 8 weeks, okay. So next step is he's off organising the surveyor to do the surveying we talked about before, and our next step is to go to the correct, he says, okay, now here, the mistake they'd made was they'd given us the owner's bank details, but they'd given us a branch that was wrong. In actual fact, his branch is actually the head office of that small bank. So that small bank is in a number of small towns around here, including, and their head office is in the next city. So they'd made a mistake and they told us this was his branch, and it wasn't. His branch is actually the head office branch. Okay, so, okay, now have to go to the head office branch and open an account so that when settlement comes, we can just transfer the money from our account at that bank and branch into his account at that bank and branch, because we're told that's the easiest way to do it, apparently. Okay, no point in arguing. So, so I turn up on my own at the bank, walk into the bank and say, and prepared, again, the best thing you can do with these things is to prepare your patience level as high as possible, because if you really have to prepare yourself, because inevitably it's more complex than it should be or that it could be or whatever. So okay, walk in fully expecting to burn probably, half an hour or more just opening an account and depositing $20,000. Those people who really wanted to know where the $20,000 from the ATM went. So that was the plan, was to deposit $20,000 into this new bank account. So walk in, okay, hello, I'd like to open a bank, all in Japanese, of course, right? Of course. Hello, I'd like to open a bank account, please. And almost straight away you can feel from the bank teller this sort of discomfort, like, because it's a foreigner and we're out in the countryside, as you can see. So, this is the biggest bank in this area, and it has branches in every town. But, who knows if they've ever seen a foreigner in there or how often they do or whatever. So straight away you can feel from the teller not getting treated the way customers normally get treated. There's a bit of a sort of a hold off and not really sure. Okay, she says, can I see your ID, please? And okay, well, that's a fair request, isn't it? So okay, pull out a driver's license. Here's a driver's license, and she looks at it and tilts her head and sucks through her teeth. Now, we've made videos about that before. If someone tilts their head and sucks through their teeth, it's not good. Whatever they say next isn't going to be good, right? So she tilts her head, sucks through her teeth, and says, "Oh, I'm very sorry. You live in the next town, don't you?" And I said, "Yes." And she said the name of the town. "You live in the next town, don't you?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, you're going to have to open an account at our branch in your town." And I said, "Oh, I understand, but I have to open the account here because," and I showed her, I had a piece of paper with the owner of the property's name and account details, and I said, "Because I'm buying some land off this guy, and I need to be able to transfer the money directly from my account into his account at this branch." And sucks through her teeth. "No, I'm sorry, you can't do that," she says. "It's not possible. It's not possible. Dekimasen." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So one of the things you can sometimes do, if you've got two people giving you conflicting stuff here, which is often what happens, is to get them talking to each other. So picked up the cell phone, said, "Just one moment, please," and called the real estate agent and said, "I'm at the right bank this time," because he's the one that gave us the wrong details last time. "At the right bank this time. They won't let us open an account because we live in the next town." And he's going, "Oh, that can't be right," and which is what you'd expect. It's always what happens here. You get two people telling you opposite, and you go, "Okay, just one moment, please, and would you please speak to this lady?" So I've put her on. "Would you please speak to this man?" So they started talking, and she's tilting her head and sucking through her teeth, and then she takes the phone back to the back counters of the bank that they always have here. They have the front counter and they have rows of desks with all these suited people sitting at it. So she takes the phone back to some guy in a suit sitting at a desk, and she shows him my ID and gives him the phone, and he's on the phone for probably 15 minutes at least, talking to the real estate agent, you know, and there's lots of tilting of the head and sucking through the teeth. So it was good because otherwise when you get a situation like that here, you get a catch-22 deadlock thing where you can't go anywhere, because, you know, the real estate agent said you must have an account at this branch to settle this land, and the bank says you can't have one. So 15 minutes later, actually halfway through the phone call, they actually asked me to go and take a seat. Went and took a seat, and they continued this phone call for about 15 minutes. And then finally another guy in a suit came over with 3 documents, right? And please complete these 3 documents. And I could see that they were to open an account, and one of them was a deposit form. So okay, so we're getting some progress. So please complete these documents, and of course they're all in Japanese, right? Now again, I'll just mention again, this is why we have our English-friendly Japan directory. This is why we made it. It cost us $14,000 to make that directory, and the reason we made it is that we know that people like us really benefit from it, right? For reasons you're about to see. So on that directory, we put the Shinsei Bank, and we did a video about the Shinsei Bank, and it's not 100% perfectly English friendly, but it's the closest in Japan. So if you really want to have a bank account in Japan, Shinsei Bank, for the reasons you're about to see. So, okay, so please fill out these forms, and it's all in Japanese, right? So it was like, okay, look, can I do Romaji for these parts? Like, it was the name, the address part. Can I do Romaji for these parts? Yes, you can do Romaji for that, but you have to do Japanese for the rest of it. And I said, okay, but I can do it, but my Japanese is very untidy, it's not really good, and it's really, really slow. So it's going to take a long time, and at the end of it, you might not be able to read it. Oh, it's okay, that's okay. And I said, really? You know, so I did the Romaji bits, and then said to him, look, really, you know, do you really want me to do this? And he said, yes. So I stood there forever, filling out these 3 forms in Japanese, and really didn't do a very good job. It's just, you know, unless you've really gone hard with your Japanese writing, it's hard to do it well enough in a circumstance like that. So anyway, I did it all, and then he comes along, looks at it like a school teacher and sucks his teeth and goes, geez. I said, well, you know, I told you. And this is an interesting point. The reason I'm mentioning this is because this is a really interesting point. There's no signatures on official documents in Japan usually. It's usually the stamp, right? The hanko. Now, there's some places where if you don't have a hanko because you're a foreigner, there's some places where they will let you sign. But quite often, more often than not, if it's an important document, they will insist that you complete the document yourself. Which in this day and age of internet online document filling out, and in this age where usually most documents you sign are all printed, you know, they insist that you do it yourself for some strange reason. All of it, the whole document, you know, which, you know, in most places around the world, you know, it's not unusual to be handed a document like that that's been printed, right? So all the information and all your details are all printed out by the computer, and you just sign the bottom, right? And date it, usually sign and date, and sometimes some countries have witnesses, don't they, who witness it and sign it, but not here. You got to write it all. So this is a bit of a heads up to you guys that if you're going to do business in Japan, or even open a bank account in Japan, or do anything like that, there's a good chance that they'll just absolutely insist that you do it yourself. And a little bit later in the process, another guy was there, and he asked for my hanko, and I gave it to him, and he hankoed a few of the documents, right? And I said to him, can I just ask a question? I said, your bank has a policy that I must complete all the forms myself with my own hand, right? And he said, yes, but it's okay for staff to use my hanko, because usually with the hanko you do it yourself, but not in this bank. In this bank, they take the hanko and they stamp the bits that need to be stamped, but you have to complete all the bits assets yourself. So it's a heads up for you guys that if you're going to do anything serious, any business, or even open a bank account here, you might find this is what they do to you. Not always the case. I mean, that's why a bank like Shinsei Bank's good, because quite often, you know, they know about foreigners because they deal with foreigners all the time, and those guys are really smart. They must do a lot of extra business because foreigners can use them without any hassle. So, but you know, when you go to a bank like this that isn't used to dealing with foreigners, every step was difficult, and there's lots of tilting of heads and sucking through teeth, and just the way they deal with you. You know, when you know how people in banks and places like that usually treat customers, and when you watch how they treat the other customers and talk to the other customers, you can definitely see a difference and feel a difference. Or in this case, not always the case, but in this case, definitely the difference. There's a big difference between the way the staff was treating me and the way that they usually treat other customers, and almost to the point where you want to say, hey, look, don't forget I'm a customer. You know, just because I'm a foreigner and my Japanese writing's not very good, you know, let's not forget I'm a customer. I didn't say that because that doesn't do any benefit, but that's how you feel sometimes here, you know, which is the purpose, again, of these videos, is to give you an idea. If you've got a bit of an idea about this stuff, then if it happens to you, you'll be better prepared. Because what often happens when stuff like this happens to people here and they're not ready for it, it can leave them feeling really bad, and they could react badly, and that doesn't help. In a circumstance like this, if you lose your patience, lose your cool, or get grumpy with them, or complain, or cause any ripples at all, and it tests your patience. Went in there fully expecting that it would be a patience test, and you know, the whole process took an hour and a half, of which most of it was spent just sitting, watching these guys walking around the room, talking to different people, looking back at me, looking at my documents, tilting their heads, sucking through their teeth. You know, it's all too hard. And again, in Japan, the systems are the way they are, and nobody's any good at stepping outside any lines to solve problems. So it would have made life a lot easier. Now, the problem that we've all got here too is our names, right? So, interestingly, Japanese driver's licenses and Japanese passports, now this is for Japanese people. If you look at a Japanese person's driver's license or a Japanese person's passport, their name is written in Romaji, right? So it's written in Roman letters. So our ABC alphabet, right? It's written in Romaji. So the passport, Japanese person's passport is written in Romaji, Japanese person's driver's license is written in Romaji. But inevitably, when they fill out forms like that, even in a place like that, now the reason when they do that, the next thing that they have underneath is furigana. And what they want is for Japanese people to then write, if their name's been written in Romaji, underneath they want it then to be written in hiragana. And in the case of the foreigners, in katakana, which, as we've said before in previous videos, is an absolute waste of time. It was an alphabet that was developed to write foreign words, and it's absolutely useless at writing foreign words. And this was the other hurdle that we had today at the bank was, you know, let's say, for example, your name's Stephen Jonathan Smith, right? In katakana, that becomes Sudiban. Jonazon Sumisu. Now, the official documents that we have, our government issued, immigration department issued ID, and our driver's license has our names written in Romaji, right? So inevitably what happens in an important sort of document like this is that staff are looking at your name written in Romaji, and then you can write it for them in katakana so they can see how it's written in katakana, or that sometimes if you say it for them, they'll write it katakana. What's your name? Stephen Jonathan Smith. No, that's not going to work, right? You got to say Stephen Jonazon Sumisu. If you're lucky. If you've got a more difficult name, it's going to get worse than that, right? So eventually they work out how to write in katakana. But then you've got two different names, right? They're not the same, are they? And then the next problem they've got is that inevitably the documents are made for people whose names are no longer than about 5 or 6 characters. The average Japanese name written in kanji or even in hiragana is usually not much longer than 5 or 6 characters, which means when you take a name like Suti Ben Jonathan Sumisu, it's not going to fit on the thing. So I asked them, please just use my first name and my last name. Please don't use my middle name, because inevitably if they do, they mess it up. And so you end up with all these different documents from all these different banks and organizations that have different names, because they end up cutting bits off, and you end up with your middle name is your first name, and you end up with, you know, your last name is your first name. They mess them all up back to front. They take the middle one, not sure what to do with that. So the end result of this one today was they end up with a bank account, and no, we have to use all three names because that's what's on your documents. Okay, no problem. So they did that, printed up the bank book, and then looked at it and realized it had cut the middle name in half. So the last half of the middle name wasn't even on the document because there was no room for it in the system, right? So even though they're using a computer, the actual field in the computer didn't have enough space for the whole name, so they end up with this bank book. They actually use bank books, old style bank books with pages with the totals written in them and stuff. And the actual bank book ended up with half the middle name missing because there's no room for it. And this is what happens. And then another document might end up with just the first letter of the middle name, or just the last letter of the middle name, or who knows. So you inevitably end up with getting mail written to all sorts of combinations of your name in all sorts of different orders. And that's the other thing, it's not intuitive for them when they see Stephen Jonathan Sumisu. That's not intuitive as to which name's the family name and which one's the given name and which one's the middle name. They've got no idea, and they end up messing them around, and it's just a mess. It's just a real mess. And you've got to have your name in Furikana, because that's inevitably what it comes back to. In the case of the bank account, the actual name on the bank card might be in katakana, in Romaji, but when you actually do a bank transfer online, it'll ask you to put it in Furikana, which means that you've got to write it in katakana, right? So it's really important, and then you can't remember which one they messed up, like, you know, what your name is in that account, because you've got to end up with a dozen different names by the time the different butchered versions of your name. You end up with all these different sort of bastard versions of your name, twisted versions of your name. So in the end, ended up with a bank account at that bank with the $20,000 deposit in there and some new name that didn't have this morning. Fabulous. So now it's a matter of transferring the money. Hopefully, you've got to try and transfer the money from the normal bank account, Shinsei bank account, into this bank account, and then have to go to the branch again to confirm that it actually worked, probably, just to make sure it's in there. And then the next step is just waiting for this survey from the real estate guy, and then off we go with the next steps from there. So guys, you know, a lot of this stuff is a lot of the reason why a lot of people, foreigners that live here, give up or spend time here, end up giving up and going home, because this stuff can really wear you down. You know, stuff that in your own country will take 5 or 10 minutes and no stress at all, as you can see, can create loads of stress here, and people sometimes get sick of this and leave. So, but there it was, and hopefully the benefit of the video is hopefully one or two people at some stage in their time in Japan might find that information useful. And at least, if nothing else, it won't change anything, but at least you'll be prepared. So when this stuff comes up, you go, oh, I knew this was coming, and you can remember to stay calm and cool and not lose your cool. If you're lucky. Anyway, there it was. More videos coming soon.